I healed my 10-year-long journey of chronic UTIs by doing exactly this. If one more person or even a doctor tells me to drink a cranberry juice, I'm going to lose my... Hi, my loves. My name is Avantika, and I am your go-to big sis, here to help you own your power, trust your path, and step into the woman you're meant to be. If you know what it's like to have a UTI, you know it's just insufferable. And when it carries on for years and years, it's just way too much. So I'm going to start off right at the beginning. So this all began 10 years ago in 2014. I was in my first relationship and I didn't even know what UTIs was until I faced this pain. And I just remember December 2014, I just remember spending that night literally by the toilet because I was just like, the pain is debilitating. If you know the symptoms, it's just like painful urination, just you feel like you have this urgency to go. Some people even notice like blood in the urine. You know what it's like, but you know, it depends on each person. There are just certain symptoms that can be really debilitating. Now, for me, this carried on even afterwards. You know, I was getting UTIs for like every 3 months. And every 3 months, I was going to the doctors, getting antibiotics. And basically, my journey or my life was dependent around UTIs. Like, I was like, this is no way to live. But I somehow was basically a slave to this condition, and this carried on for another 7 years. And to be honest, in this time, I just took antibiotics. I never really thought about, like, you know, perhaps it has to do with the fact that I need to make certain changes in my life. But that didn't click to me because I was still young, I was exploring the world, and, you know, in my relationship. And part of me actually thinks that perhaps I was getting chronic UTIs because my body was trying to reject the partner that I was with. So this carried on for 7 years. I relied on antibiotics, and to be honest, I didn't know what to do. And I really hoped and prayed it would go away. So then I had a chance to move to a different country. I moved abroad to Germany, and I was living there. But new country, but the same problems persisted. And in fact, my symptoms turned really weird. They were nothing like the first UTI. They were actually more so just like this low grade pain that just wouldn't go away. I can't really describe it. Like, it wasn't severe, but it was also so much like there that it would stop you from really being effective at your work and effective in like just life. You would still be like, you know, sometimes I would sit at a dinner with friends, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, am I like gonna be okay? Because I have this, like, I can feel the symptoms within my body. And the people who have added, only they would know what it's like. The people who have actually faced this, only they would know what that feeling is like. Because anyone who hasn't faced this would not know and cannot understand. But I'm here for you. I know if you've been in this boat, this is debilitating, but we are not dealing with this again. So I kept getting them, so I finally decided to see a gynecologist. And the gynecologist actually told me, yeah, it seems like you may have either a candida infection as well as a UTI. So there were further culture tests that done. And she basically said that, yes, I do have candida, but also they did further 10-day test analysis of a swab that they took from a vaginal sample, and they said it could actually be ureaplasma. So I was diagnosed with something that I hadn't heard of. But one of the things that really annoyed me was that apparently ureaplasma is only possible that if you are either sexually active or you're with another person. For me at the time, that was not the case. So for me, I was baffled. I was like, why am I being blamed for this? I didn't do it. So yeah, it wasn't to do with that. It is just something, you know, within your body. And I didn't know much about it. There weren't a lot of papers about it either. I remember researching it, Googling it, and feeling so confused, like, why aren't we told about this? Honestly, then I saw countless doctors, other GPs, other specialists, and they kind of said the same thing. And this was all in Germany, by the way. They kind of said similar thing. They even did like scans of my kidneys. They said, yeah, you have great kidneys. Nothing is wrong. So I was just so lost. I was like, I don't know what's happening. And And then I kind of just left it. I just relied on antibiotics. And to be honest, at the times when I described my symptoms, and sometimes the tests would come negative, that was one of the most baffling things. Why is a test negative when my symptoms are literally present in my body? And sometimes the doctors would be reluctant to give me antibiotics because they would be like, well, I think you're kind of like, okay, they didn't say it, but I'm pretty sure that the message that I was getting was, I think you're making it up. It's all in your head. And at some point I felt gaslit, and I felt like maybe I should just accept this. Maybe it is all in my head. But that didn't negate the fact that I had pain in my body. So I started taking certain supplements called D-mannose. And D-mannose is meant to be this extract from cranberry, which is meant to help the bacteria basically slide off the lining of the bladder, so that the bacteria doesn't stick there and doesn't grow as much. I don't know if it really worked for me, to be honest. I'm kind of still unsure, but I didn't try it for super long time. I was pretty good at drinking a lot of water, but still, like I currently don't know if it really helped. It helped temporarily at times, but not fully. So then comes a new partner in my life, and with this new partner, I was a bit scared, to be honest. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get UTI symptoms probably. And I did get these UTI symptoms. Then that really made me question, okay, what is going on with my body? And having lost basically hope with doctors, having lost hope with supplements and trying to manage my symptoms and basically relying on antibiotics, I had to take a different route. So the route I took was I turned to holistic healing. I reached out to certain holistic healers, and I actually went for Reiki healing as well. And to be honest, the Reiki helped my symptoms so much. It relieved them. And I remember when I had my first Reiki treatment, because I was having some UTI symptoms, I just felt like painless for like just one day. And I remember that feeling so well, just not having to worry about having this UTI, right? Having this pain in your bladder and pelvic region and feeling like maybe you need to be close to a toilet, as much as possible. That feeling, I remember not having that feeling and feeling so relaxed in my body. And I was so thankful for Reiki at that time that I decided to train in it. And I became a Reiki healer. Those of you who don't know me, I am a Reiki healer as well. So this opened up a whole new journey of self-discovery and energy healing. So after all this part, this has been about now 7 years, right? 7 to 8 years. And I would say at this point in my life, I couldn't find a magic pill that would solve all my problems. There wasn't one. But I realized that there has got to be a root cause for this. A root cause that I haven't yet identified, or I haven't yet, come across. So I had to go deeper. That was the only way. And with energy work, all I knew was that any sort of like reproductive, bladder issue, it can be really linked to your sacral chakra, which is all to do with your creative expression, being able to express your voice, being able to truly express your emotions without fearing, feeling safe to be able to do so. For some women, it also has to do with just their sexual expression in life. If they've ever been mistreated in life, that can really make their pelvis really tight. And there are a lot of studies on this. So getting familiar with the sacral chakra was the key here. Then I started coming across this organization called Live UTI Free. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. They are doing amazing work. They are gathering all the research, case studies, everything possible, and an answer may exist for you there. So that's what I used actually at the time, as well as doing my own holistic healing. So coming onto my own holistic healing path, I actually discovered Ayurveda. Now, Ayurveda, those of you who are not familiar, Ayurveda is an ancient Indian way of living. And what I have learnt from it is that with Ayurveda, I am Vata dosha type. And Vata dosha actually governs your certain organs in your body, some of them being actually to do with your reproductive organs. So I often thought that my problem was previously to do with my bladder, but actually it was also to do with just everything that is governed by the Vata dosha. And I had those symptoms as well because, I was getting candida infections. And Vata doshas are usually people who they tend to be very good at creative work. They can think of beautiful, wonderful, out of the box ideas. But the downside is that they tend to be overthinkers. And I've been an overthinker for my entire life. Grounding was something I had needed a long time ago, but I had not found previously. And discovering this was such a key because I didn't realize that I also had certain level of dehydration, which had also led to certain constipation. And also, once Vata people tend to get like really immersed in their work, they don't tend to stop. So you don't realize that actually your body is telling you signals to like, go or do something. And that's when I realized, gosh, I'm not listening to my body. And really learning this and adopting a Vata pacifying diet is what really helped me. And if you want to know about what a Vata pacifying diet is, just send me an email below, and I'll send you some resources for that. So I began doing grounding practices, meditations, yoga, all these different healing modalities that just helped me get back to myself. And now this is not just about your diet, right? It's not just about what you eat, it's also about your mental diet. It's also about how you talk to yourself every day. What is your inner voice saying? And it's actually much, much deeper than that. This is an entire healing journey, much, much deeper than just simply saying, here's a pill or antibiotic, this is going to help you. This has to do with how I realized this had to do with how I was thinking, how I was living every day, how I was talking to myself every day, how I was overloading myself, overburdening myself after just in this hustle mode that I was constantly in. And I'll be honest, I'm sure like, there are certain other reasons to do with these UTI recurrences in female, much more so than men, which has to do with our anatomy. And I'm 100% sure that if men had as much recurrence of this, and if their anatomy was just even a little bit closer to what ours looks like, there would have been a cure by now for a urinary tract infection. But there isn't one because it's much more prevalent in women than it is in men. Now, talking about the inner work, I realized that the fact that it had much more to do with just how we think about ourselves, our societal conditioning and suppression of our emotions. This has to do with how we grew up as people pleasing. People pleasing in very small ways, even like whether that is at work, where you were told to put others before ourselves. And when that is the case, it's really hard. It's really hard to know what your true inner voice is rather than what you are expected to do. Your inner voice can be overridden by this conditioned voice, your ego that has been programmed from such a young age to say, go make sure that you do this, this sort of good girl conditioning. And it's really hard to break out of. And I personally believe, for me at least, that was one of the reasons my UTI symptoms persisted and for such a long time, because I was meant to heal it. And if that wasn't my UTI symptoms weren't present there, I don't know if I would have healed it in such a way, if I would have ever taken such steps. Really connecting to my intuition was such a key. And I grew up in a culture, an Indian culture, which has certain societal expectations, and that plays a role. That plays a role where you're meant to fulfill other people's desires than yours. Now, the next part was quite interesting. So my UTI symptoms were actually getting better. I was getting better at like managing pain as well as my symptoms. And my nervous system had expanded enough to be able to hold the fear that I had before. Before I would fear for my life. But now I truly felt like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I know when it's going to get worse, or if it isn't, I have certain protocols that I can follow. Then I had a pretty bad episode when I realized that actually it's time to go get another scan done. And I had an ultrasound scan done, and that revealed quite a few other things, but not necessarily to do with urinary tract infections. That revealed a lot of other things to do with fertility. I had polyps in my uterus, and quite a few other things that just came out of nowhere. And I was like, but I was trying to look at more so my urinary tract infection root cause. Why are these things coming up? And if you have done Reiki and if you know about like your symptoms being a message from your body for a certain, ailment, it's actually a certain message that they're delivering. And if you know the book, Heal Your Body by Louise Hay, that literally explains it. That literally explains what your symptom means. That if you have a lower back pain, it's that you have a fear of money. At the moment, you are in a scarcity mode, and you've been in that scarcity mode for such a long time that your body is manifesting that. And that is something I really had to delve into, because I was like, oh gosh, my body's communicating with me. Now, the other thing I did was, which I highly recommend, is get PCR testing. The efficacy of a dipstick test in a GP's office is just so low. And often you can end up with a negative test when you actually have the symptoms and the infection. And sometimes then the culture test is done, it also doesn't show up. So what are you meant to do? And that is where I recommend getting PCR tests done. They're not cheap, but if you're suffering for so long, they will help you. And what a PCR test does is it tells you which bacteria might be causing the infection. Now, here is something which really hits my heart, which is that our medical system has literally failed women. It has truly failed women, right? How is it that we have such fertility issues, weird diseases that are coming out of nowhere, and the fact that we have chronic illnesses that don't have solutions, yet we have solutions for different types of Viagra? And it is through this PCR testing I actually realized that, and through the resources from Live UTI Free, that actually perhaps what I have is not necessarily an infection that is reoccurring or a recurrent UTI. It's perhaps an infection that never fully went away, because a lot of trial of antibiotics is what is the usual protocol. If one antibiotic doesn't work, then the next one is tried, the next one is tried, and that's not good for our bodies. So the infection never really fully clears. And sometimes there's also antibiotic resistance that happens, and biofilms, and there's all this data that I can enlighten you about, that I've read, tried to solve my UTI problem. And to be honest, I even went down the route of getting my diet in order. In my family, there's a history of gluten allergy and gluten intolerance, so I knew that my gut health is probably not going to be the best. It has run from family, and so there's a link between gut health and also your vaginal microbiome. So I knew that there was some sort of link there, because I've also had some stomach problems before. So all in all, is what I'm going to say is this. My current protocol is that I still use antibiotics if something comes up, but it's much less now. I use self-Reiki. I use probiotics. I don't drink alcohol. I barely drink coffee. I have an Ayurvedic lifestyle. I do a lot of energy healing work, and I have switched my careers, going from a hustle culture, male dominated field of academia and engineering, and I've now switched to becoming a women's coach, basically. That's what I do for a living, because I've had to deal with all these things, which are not really considered in our system these days, and not really empathized with. Honest truth is, the biggest shift that I noticed with my healing was when I made a full commitment to my healing. This infection, this disease does not define me. It's not my defining part. It is time to move on from this. This doesn't get to dictate what I do. This doesn't get to dictate where I travel, how I travel, do I take antibiotics just in case something comes up. This will not dictate my life anymore. And I took a stand against it, and I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. This doesn't get to dictate it. I want a normal, healthy life, and that's it. And to be honest, the real failure here, after all these changes that I've made in my life, and with such medical advances that we have, I feel like the real failure here is the medical system and lack of women's health data. That is the real failure here. I may have gone through my healing, and I'm still going through my healing through, on this self-love journey, but it doesn't negate the fact that there still isn't that much research done on this topic and for women's health. So that's why I would say that if you're in this journey at this moment, trust your body, trust your symptoms, and don't back down. Make your voice be heard, because your body's trying to tell you something, even if it feels like is it in my head? You're being gaslit by doctors, and I'm sure they're trying their best as well. But you need good doctors. You need the doctors that can listen to you and truly be empathetic and say, okay, well, if you've had this many cases of, UTIs, then maybe this means something. They are not just, they are aware of your history, of your life history. Yes, you're also doing the work, but also do not give up, because there is a solution. There is a solution. It can be resolved eventually, but what a solution for me look like may not look like for you. But I have shared all my tips which may help you. And I think that the biggest thing that you will learn from this journey is that your intuition is the strongest ally that you have with you, is the strongest part of you. Healing is possible. You're not broken. You are the divine feminine, and your body is always guiding you home. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that this brought you some comfort. And if you have any more questions, do reach out. And I'll see you in the next one.